Mercedes-Benz W163. This is a 2005 ML500 with some front engine oil leaks. We're going after the filter housing seal, the oil cooler seal, and the pressure port seal. Check the pinned comment for the timestamps. Diagnostics is next. The repair starts at about the 3-minute mark. This repair is similar on other Mercedes with the M113 engines or the 112s with the oil cooler. So what happened on this particular ML, I did the water pump replacement, and in the process I noticed that there was quite a bit of oil on the front of the timing case cover down there behind the belt and pulleys. So I cleaned that up and put everything back together just to get an idea of where the leak was coming from, because there's a few places where it might be, and in this case it does look like, as you can see by the oil collection there, that the oil is leaking between this here, which is the housing for the oil filter, and the timing case cover down there. And there's also a couple of seals between this oil cooler and this housing. In addition to those 3 seals over here, another place you might want to check if you're having an oil leak in the front of the engine is down here, but it's actually better seen from over here. Gonna kind of lean in here and get down, look between these 2 reaches of the belt there, and that's it right there. There's a few different names for that component there. It's sometimes called expansion plug, it's called pressure port, it's called a few different things, but what it is a plate. It's held on with 2 small E10 fasteners. There's a large rubber gasket behind it that seals an open hole in the front of the timing case cover, and then that circle part. There's a copper gasket on that. That's just a plug. You can turn that out and then thread in an oil pressure gauge so you can get oil pressure. This one, you want to check with the engine running. So run the engine and then come down here just like this and look in there, because if it's leaking, you'll be able to see it leaking. Come right here to this area, lean down in here, and you're looking between the belts. That's it there. Because all of these components are kind of close together, the oil cooler and the housing and this thing, they all kind of make a similar drip pattern. That drip pattern is to drip down behind the tensioner here, down onto the AC compressor down there, and then ultimately onto one particular bolt. If we come over here on the driver's side, this is that particular bolt. This is a mounting bolt here for the AC compressor. It'll be really dirty because you see all this dirt and stuff. So since I'm going to be removing that oil filter housing, there's a lot of oil in there still, even when the engine's off and cool. I'm going to go ahead and drain the oil and get an oil change in while we do this. So before we open up the drain plug, I'll just go ahead and first we can just open up this. I'll just help us drain a little more, leave it like that. And then we'll get the filter out. You need a tool like this to get that filter out. There's an example part number there, and then I just wrote those. That's all the data that we'll need there, but you also see this throughout the video. So I'll go ahead and loosen that filter. There we go. I'm just going to leave the filter like this for the moment. I'm not going to take it out because obviously there'll be a big hole there. Don't want to drop anything in it. Over here on the passenger side, this is our engine oil pan. Here's our drain plug. That's a 13mm. It's going to shoot this way, especially when you first remove that plug. And oil's going to kind of get everywhere. I'm going to crack it open and I'll try to get a funnel in there before I remove the drain plug all the way. I was able to sort of finagle a funnel in there. Let's see if this is going to help me any. It's probably still just going to be a mess. There's a gasket on there too that should come off with your drain plug, but if it doesn't, you'll just have to pick it off the drain plug or the drain pan after. Here we go. Okay, looks like I'm catching most of the oil. Well, let's go ahead and let this drain. There is our drain plug gasket. You can see it's copper. Make sure you find your old gasket. It's either going to be on your drain plug or it'll be stuck to the, sometimes it gets stuck to the oil pan, or it might have fallen out in your oil. Just don't double up on them, so account for it. Don't accidentally miss it and then put another gasket on top of it. There you go. You can see on the right there that difference in height. The flange on the drain plug does crush this, so you don't want to reuse these. Here's our new one right here. Looks good. So here's our drain plug, got it cleaned up, and our new gasket. Torque on this is 30 Newton meters or 22 foot-pounds. There it is. All right. You do want to get this oil cleaned up so that you don't think you have an oil leak in the future. I'm going to remove the belt. It's not necessary for this job, but it protects the belt from getting oil on it. There will be some oil that leaks when we disconnect the cooler from the housing. If you want to remove the belt, just come over here. And there's a feature on the tensioner. So here's the tensioner. The tensioner mounts underneath where this belt reaches. There's a 17 millimeter feature there. It looks like a 6-point fastener. It's not, it's a pivot point. But all you got to do is put a 17 millimeter socket on there. If you take your left hand, you reach in and you put your thumb on the crankshaft in the middle of the crankshaft pulley, and then you just kind of drop your pinky down. It'll pretty much land on that feature. So where my pinky is there, it's on that feature. You can run your pinky around it to feel that shape. I'll also give you a view from below. Looking from underneath here, you can see that's the crankshaft pulley, and that there is the feature that I'm talking about. Just get a 17 millimeter on that, turn it counterclockwise. 17 millimeter 12 point. I really like this slim boy here from Harbor Freight for doing this job when the fan shroud is in place, because not a lot of room. It actually works a lot better sometimes to stick the socket on that feature first. So let's see if I can grab it. Okay, I got the socket on it. Alright, there we go. So you can see I'm on that feature there. Now I'm just going to move counterclockwise and I'm going to slip it off right here. There we go. And then I'm just going to slowly release it back. You can lock it out, but I just prefer to slowly release it back like that. There, with the belt off, you get a good look of the tensioner. That's the socket just sitting on that 17 millimeter feature. This is the other thing that sometimes leaks. I'll come back to this later. We'll next move to the 4 fasteners for the oil cooler. You can see we have one here, we have one down there, then we have one up here. Those are all easy enough to reach, but then we got one down there. It's hard to reach because the secondary air pump is in the way. Depending on what kind of tools you have, you might be able to get on that one. I'm going to go ahead and remove this. That'll be easier to get a tool in there. It's literally just 1, 2, 3 little steps, and it'll give us lots of room. First step we'll do for the air pump is this electrical. Just going to kind of squeeze it and then wiggle it up. It's got 2 prongs. Don't want to break anything, but it's usually not too difficult to remove. Here it comes. Okay. Now here we just have an E10. Before removing that fastener all the way, just come back here and just pop this hose off this feature here. Like that. And now this comes out. I'll put a little piece of tape on here just to keep the fastener together like that, and this just rocks right out. Now we have room. Now you can see we got easy access to that fastener. Lift that out. You could always try to work around it, but there's your solution if you can't work around it. Now we'll go ahead and remove these fasteners. Make it a little template so you don't get the bolts mixed up. You can see 3 of them. The 4th one's down here. I'm going to use a 1/4 inch drive T30 because it's smaller. The 3/8 is probably pretty bulky. I'm just going to crack each one before I remove any one. Actually, and I'm going to go to this one next. See, it's nice when you got room. And oops, sorry, I'll come up here and I'll go down here. They should not be very tight. Okay, this one's even easier to reach with a bit of a long extension. And the name of the game will be not dropping these. But even if they fall, hopefully it's in the front of the engine. Unless they fall and get wedged behind a pulley or something. I got a magnet ready here. Give me a little extra hand. This fastener from that hole down there has got oil on it, so it looks like those seals were leaking. Looks like all of those bolts are the same. I have a paper towel down there. You can see a little drop of oil already dripped down there. And you can just barely pull this back. There's one of the seals there. The other one's down lower. We'll remove this housing next. But this oil cooler, if you're watching this video because you're removing the oil cooler, you have to disconnect these coolant lines, and there's coolant in here. So I don't even know that you have enough hose to put a clamp on. So just drain your coolant before disconnecting these coolant lines on the oil cooler. Now we'll move over to the housing. Now for the housing, we'll go ahead and take this out, and you want to make sure you don't drop anything. There's going to be a big hole at the bottom. We'll deal with this a little later. And there you have a good look into the oil filter housing here. That goes straight down, so you don't want to drop anything in there. You can see there's a little bit of oil there. I'm going to remove that oil before we go in. You can also see the hex shape of a big union vault. There you can see I cleaned it up a bit, and that's a big kahuna. We're going to use a 46mm socket to free that. I'll just show you real quick how this fits in here, and then we'll go to the bench to discuss this socket a little bit more, because there are some things that you want to consider. Alright, so that's what you're going for. Alright, let's address this socket here. If this setup looks huge, it's because this setup is huge. I have here a 3/4 inch extension. Most people don't have, and most people certainly don't need 3/4 inch extensions. I only have a few 3/4 inch sockets and extensions for certain jobs, but I'm showing you this so that you will remember that this is a 3/4 inch drive. So you need to get step down to whatever extensions and wrench you do have. This is the most popular socket for this job for a few really good reasons. Number one reason, it's readily available on Amazon for under like $15. The other really important reason, regardless of the price, is that it fits in that housing. So this is a 12-point, and it's these thin walls. And that's what's important, because you're not going to be able to get just any 46mm socket into that housing. Especially if you decide to go with a 6-point impact rated socket, it's going to have thick walls, and those walls are not going to get in there. If you find that you are having to tap to get onto the fastener, stop with that socket, whatever you're using, because you're going to crack the housing. The housing is some type of aluminum alloy, and it's not going to take any kind of beating. If you get this socket, which I would recommend, just be sure to get something to step you down from 3/4 inch to 1/2 inch. Here's a couple options for you to consider. This is my favorite one. I'll try to find the part number for that kit. I think that was Aries. I just like that one because these do the same thing, but the Aries is much more compact. This one is readily available at Harbor Freight. This is a Pittsburgh. And so all you can see all it is here. It's got the 3/4 inch side, and it's got a 1/2 inch side. So you get this together, and now you're able to get down to your more common 1/2 inch extensions, and then put your 1/2 inch breaker bar or 1/2 inch ratchet on here. I do not recommend stepping down again to a 3/8. You're going to get a lot of twist if you go that many drop downs on a fastener that's this tight, so I would stick with the 1/2 inch. What I'm going to do is, I got a long 1/2 inch breaker bar, but I'm just going to give it a shot with my comfy 1/2 inch ultra long ratchet, and that's probably not going to work. If it doesn't work, then I'll go ahead and I'll move straight up to my 3/4 inch setup, because I have a great big Kahuna 3/4 inch breaker bar that's super long. Alright, so we will give this a shot. I'm going to use the 1/2 inch extension. See how that works instead of the 3/4 inch. Make sure if you're using a ratchet, you're in the off position. You don't want to accidentally tighten it. Or of course, if you're using a breaker bar, you're going to go the same way, obviously, which is going to be counterclockwise. Keep one hand here to make sure that you're not rocking any. You want to make sure you have a good grip on there. And give it a go. It's going to be pretty tight. Alright, I'm going to have to step up to a longer bar. I'm going to go up to my 3/4 inch. And let's give this a shot. Here we go. Counterclockwise. And there it is. Boy, that's a piece of cake with 3/4 inch. Alright. That's a pretty big setup, as you can see. And obviously most people don't have 3/4 inch drive tools. But even a long 1/2 inch drive breaker bar would have got that done. It would have taken a lot more effort though. So for me as a woman, man, it was real nice to have all of that extra leverage there. So with that loosened, it should pretty much just spin right out. It's spinning real well. Alright, you can see there I've got it loosened. I haven't got it taken out all the way, but because I believe, yeah, I can just lift this up. I'm just going to make sure there's not any kind of like dirt going to fall down that hole. And there is our culprit. That's the seal we're going after. I'm going to go ahead and just pull this back a little bit, wipe any dirt that kind of moved towards there, and I'm just going to cover this up. We'll deal with the housing, and then we'll come back and do this, but I don't want anything falling in there. Here's our oil filter housing up on the bench, and here's our big fastener here. It's like I think this might be called like a big union bolt. It's very big. And you can see we have the seal here and here, and then that other one is still in the vehicle. And here are these seals with their part numbers. And now I'm just going to go ahead and get in here with a little pick and pull these seals out. I don't want to make any scratches in the housing. End up with another place where it might leak. We'll see if they're real brittle or what. It feels kind of hard, but we'll see. Let me get this other one out as well. There we go. Okay. I'll go ahead and really clean this. If you're not going to clean the whole thing, you at least want to clean inside those channels just so there's no dirt and stuff. When we reinstall this, we'll put a little bit of grease on these. And then it's also worth noting there's a little hole right there. Make sure that's not obstructed. So I got it cleaned up a bit, so it's time to install these little seals. Here's the new one. You can see it's very flexible, and here's the old one. Not so flexible. Same with this here. I get that to focus a little better versus this one. So those are going to the trash. These are our new ones. Now I'm going to lubricate these. I'm going to use Sil Glide, and the reason I'm going to use Sil Glide is I'm not sure what these are, but they're probably some type of like nitrile, or I don't know what they are, but Sil Glide will be okay for them pretty much no matter what they are. But if you know what they are and you know of a good grease to use, you can put that in the comment section. I've heard about using white lithium grease, but I'm a little apprehensive since I don't know what the seals are actually made of, because if the white lithium grease can cause some degradation. Although swelling might actually be a good thing to happen in this particular application, then it would probably be even less likely to leak. This is ready to go back in. Now we just need to pop out that other seal. And there's our seal in there. I don't think I need a pick for this. If yours is really brittle and you fear that it may fall into pieces, then you might want to kind of cover that hole. I'm just going to clean up these surfaces here. I'll clean this up after I clean our surfaces here. Don't want to knock anything into there. I got that cleaned up there. It's ready for our new seal. There's no top surface or bottom surface to this seal, or the other ones if I didn't mention that. But do make sure that it is aligned correctly with that point there, as you can see. Maybe that's part of the reason it leaks, is if it gets a little, if it doesn't quite get in there right. I don't know. Let's see if I can get it in there really well and pushed into all the corner spots where it needs to go. Watch that electrical there, because it has like no slack and it kind of wants to try to interfere with you and try to knock dirt in. So I'm just pushing it down with my finger all the way around until it feels like it's in. So the seal is in there. I'm ready for the housing now. Note that this part here on the housing is going to align with that part there. So just keep that in mind as you're putting it in. I'm just double checking my seals, make sure they're all pushed into place. And have your big union bolt and your socket nearby, because once you get this on, I'm looking down the center to get it about lined up. That looks about right, but we'll find out when I put the bolt in. So I'm pressing down on it a bit to kind of keep it aligned. And put the bolt in. And as you saw and noticed when you were removing it, it should be very easy to turn. If it's not easy to turn, then it's getting cross-threaded. So there we go. Or in that case, I think it was just kind of running into the frame until it gets past there. It should be real easy to turn. So let's see how far we got it in. Yeah, we got it pretty much all the way in. So if you were concerned that you're cross-threading it, back it off. It's like a, spark plug. Make sure that you got your on those threads and keep it going in like that. So before I torque that down, I'm just going to double check that electrical back there with the light and make sure that it's not being pinched between the gasket or between the housing and the... Okay, yeah, I can see it's moving. Hopefully you can see that. That's moving. I don't like how close that is to there, but I can imagine if you accidentally pinch that, that might be a point for it to leak. Now we can torque this down. You may have noticed I got rid of my 3/4 inch drive just because I'm going to be using a 1/2 inch drive torque wrench. I'll just go ahead and do that hand tight again. It should be nice and easy to turn until you're clamping. Okay, I've got my torque wrench set to 70 Newton meters. We'll get this torqued down here. Starting to tighten up. And there it is. All right. I'll just cover this up real quick. So we did those 3 seals on the housing, and here's that other part that can leak. This is what it looks like as you're looking in the engine. This is what it looks like when you take it out. Let's go back and look at this on the engine real quick, and I'll give you a couple important bits of info. There is that cover plate, pressure port, whatever you want to call it. Now this is not leaking on this ML500, so I'm not going to replace the gasket. These are finicky, so if it's not leaking, I recommend you just leave it alone. However, if yours is leaking, I'm going to go over to the 350, which is now our scrap engine, and I will show you how to remove it off of the 350. It's exactly the same on the 112 and the 113. So here's that pressure port plate. Let's take a closer look. It's either going to leak here at that crush washer, that copper crush washer, or more likely it leaks at the black gasket that's between the plate and the timing case cover here. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to remove this plug. You may decide to also remove or at least crack this plug open if these feel too tight when you get on them, because sometimes cracking this plug will it does something where it loosens these if they feel really tight. They shouldn't be tremendously tight. I haven't drained the oil on this, so this will also give us an idea about how much oil leaks. if you decide to do this repair with your oil still in. If yours is leaking here at this copper gasket, then I would start by just removing this, replacing the copper gasket, and going back in. If yours is not leaking at this copper gasket and you're not going to replace the plate, then I would just remove these two fasteners, replace the gasket, and put it back in. Just to show you all the steps, I'll go ahead and go on that drain plug here. And this is going to be a 6mm. Get in there and I'll turn that out. There it is. And we're going to get a little bit of oil. Ooh, that's really on there. That socket's really on there. Let me grab a paper towel. Like I said, I haven't drained the oil on this engine. Let's see how much oil comes out. Hopefully not a whole lot. Alright. Nothing really so far. Okay. So then, if this is your leak, you would pull this off. Probably need a pick to pull that off. Oh, there it goes there. You'd pull that off, put your new one on, which I'm not doing here. I'll just screw this back on here for you and give you the torque value. It's a fairly low torque value if I remember, but I'll put that up on the screen. So then, if this is not leaking on yours, don't even mess with what we just saw. Just take off these two fasteners. Those are going to be E10s. And these should not be very tight either. They should be much less tight than that. It's important when you're reinstalling these not to do them too tight. See that? They don't even crack. These are not tight. Oh, this one feels like it'll crack. There we go. So I'll remove these two fasteners. And if I didn't mention it, do clean this area up before you open this, because you don't want dirt to fall in. There'll be an open hole here when we get this plate off. There's one of those. And there is the other. And now this should just pretty much pop off. There we go. A little bit of oil leak. Let me get my napkin down there. Ooh, I might need a little bit. Might need another. Okay, so this is the new style cap there. And you can see there's the gasket. Let me grab another paper towel. Hopefully I don't regret this and a bunch of oil comes out and makes a mess. Let me pull this out. Well, not a whole lot. Not a whole lot of oil coming out. That's the amount of oil that came out of there. Not really too bad. So I do definitely recommend draining the oil if you're doing the oil cooler seals, and that especially if you're doing that housing seal. But if you're just doing this, then it doesn't look like you need to drain the oil. There's our parts there for that plate here on the bench. And I'll show you, this is one of these same plates from another, I can't remember where this is from, which one this is from, but this is also the new style plate. You can see the letter stamping is just a little bit different. So there's a closer look there. This crush washer, I'll put that part number up for you. This isn't usually what leaks. What usually leaks is this gasket here. And you can kind of see that line right there. That's to allow for oil to flow through when you have an instrument placed. So to replace this gasket, you just pop it out, and then I'll make the note here. I'm not sure when they changed this plate design, but they at some point changed this plate. And so they also changed the gasket. That's why if you are going to replace this, it's almost worth just paying the extra $8 and buying the new plate, because you know that it'll fit with the new gasket. If you get in there and you have a different plate than what you see here, this gasket, this new design gasket, won't work. I say new, it's been around for a long time, but at some point they changed it. So what we'll do here is we'll take our new gasket. Here's the gasket number right there. And I'm not actually myself going to use that new gasket, but you should always use a new gasket. I'm not going to use a new gasket because this 112 that you just saw this come off of is actually going to be taken apart. So I'm not going to waste a new gasket on something that I'm going to start taking apart real soon. And so you do want to just show you to grease this up. I'm going to use Seal Glide. You can use, I do think white lithium grease would be good on this application. And when we install this, it's important to get the orientation of this gasket correct. The back side of the gasket needs to go on this flat side here, right? That needs to face out. So when we put it on, we're going to put it on just like that. Oops. Just like that. This is the correct orientation. if you flip this gasket around accidentally and install it, it's liable to leak. This design is to help push that oil against that slit, against the flat part, so that you don't get any extra leaks around the back of the gasket. So that's the correct way to put that gasket in. And then I'm also going to reuse my crush washer. I'll put that part number up for you. You don't want to reuse yours, but like I said, this is just going back on for demonstration purposes. We will do it correctly, but we'll do it correctly, but it's this 112 not going to get driven anymore. So there it is. I'm going to tighten this down a little bit later. This is going to be our orientation. I got the bolts cleaned up. We'll clean up those bolt holes. We'll get this back on. As you can see, not a whole lot of oil leaking out there anymore, but I am going to clean out these bolt holes. Especially if there's oil in there, you want to clean them out. Alright, and I got this gasket surface cleaned up really well. And we will go on with our new gasket. Now, remember that this is, it's got this feature down here. So this flat part is going to go up here. Get that out of the way. And this part here goes down there. Alright, so I don't even know if it's possible to get it on backwards, but don't put it on backwards. We'll get this lined up, get these in. The torque value on these fasteners is very low. We'll get these in hand tight and then switch to the torque wrench and just go back and forth on them. Okay, now grab the torque wrench. Torque is just 8 Newton meters, or just 71 inch-lbs. Very low torque. Go back and forth. There it is there. So you can see it. This one. There it is. You can see it didn't move much. Alright, now we'll torque that down. Torque on that one is also fairly low. It's just 20 Newton meters. Get on here. There it is. Alright. So that's all there is to it to change out this gasket here. You can see it's a pretty straightforward job. Okay, now we can move back to the 500. Now we can change out the oil filter. Oil filter will just come off like this. Okay. And then we have an O-ring here, 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 and here. Those are all going to come off. And then here. And lastly, this little one up here. Alright, here's the replacement filter and the part number there. You want to use the fleece filters. That's what it looks like inside. There, you might be able to see that. Made in Germany. And it comes with a little diagram. Just going to put these right back where we took them off. There is going to be one that we won't use, which will be a second one of these medium-sized ones. There's no top or bottom to the filter, but there are these two lines, equal distance from the midpoint, and that's just to remind you, as it shows on here, that the filter is correctly installed when you only see one line, not when you see two lines. So that's just saying when you put it on here, that's not installed properly because you can see two lines. You got to get it all the way in, so it can still go a little bit further yet. You just want to make sure you get it as far in as you can. There we go. And we can only see one line there now, so we know the filter's in the right position. You can also tell looking down here, if you don't have it in the right position, it's going to be too far up here. So now we can do our O-rings. Remember, we have one here in that channel there, not above it, in that wide channel, this channel here, this one here, and that one there. So I'll just take a little new engine oil and lubricate these and slip them on. Here's the big one. Goes down and it goes, it's flexible enough that you can bring it around like that. You know, put it right into that channel there. Let me get this to focus. Okay, so make sure it's in there all the way around. Turn it all the way around. It's good. Don't put it up there, all right? What I'm saying is don't put it here. Oops, sorry. Don't put it here, put it there. All right, then we'll grab one of these. The new kit comes with two. We're only going to need one. And this one's going to go right here in that channel, in there. Should just pretty much roll in. There we go. Okay, then we have this one, that's the second to the smallest one. We'll put a little bit more oil on that. Okay, this one's gonna go right in there. I'm gonna use the pick to kind of help me with this one. I gotta get it in there a little bit better with the pick. Okay, it's in there, and then this top one is gonna be the smallest one. Right here. Just like that. Alright, what you want this to look like when you're done, again, you only want to be able to see one of those lines. You can see that one because I'm turning it, but when you're holding it like this, you can't see it. That way you know it's up there all the way. And again, there's another clue. You want to have your O-ring right up here, this biggest one, in that channel. Right? Then you want to have your second one right there in that channel. The third one is there, and the fourth one is there. And this will be an extra one that comes with the kit, which is the same size as that one, so we don't need that. So this is ready to go in. Now we can get this oil filter right back where it needs to go. We'll just stick it right back in here. Okay. We'll get this hand tight, and then this is going to get torqued to 25 Newton meters, as it says on the cap. Torque is 25 Newton meters, or 18.5 foot-pounds. There it is right there. And I'll mention, if your cap gets stuck, just kind of stick something in here and just barely wiggle it. It'll usually pop off. I forgot to mention it earlier, but when you have this on the bench, or even if you don't take this out, but you're doing something with the oil cooler, get a Q-tip and go into each one of those bolt holes, because you'll see there's all kinds of stuff in there. Now we can get those T30s in. Remember, those are these little ones. And the name of the game is not dropping them. This is a helpful cool tool. These only cost like $4 or $5 usually when you can find them at the hardware store or whatever. This is a magnetizer and a demagnetizer. So you can take your bit, put it in there, and now your bit's magnetized so that you're not going to be dropping the fastener. So that's all the help we can get. I'll go ahead and line this up. And I'm just going to get each one of them started before fastening down any of them. And you might have to kind of move the oil cooler if things aren't lining up. Just kind of move it until they are. I have two different values for the torque on these. For the 113 engine, it's 9 Newton meters. For the 112 engine, it is 11 Newton meters. This is a 113, so I'm going to be doing 9 Newton meters, or about 80 inch-pounds. Got all those fasteners in there for the oil cooler. Now make sure you wipe down all the oil that came out during the repair. See, that kind of gives you an idea of what that oil leak looks like too, because when we took that out, that's basically simulating that. And that is a telltale sign of this leak. You can see that's actually there from the repair, but before I cleaned everything up, I had that exact same pattern. So that's a mounting bolt for the AC compressor. The oil from that housing seal, when it starts leaking, it'll end up right there, and it'll put a little drop of oil on the ground. Now we'll put this pump back in. This is real easy. These two features here go into there, and then this is going to go back here on this hose, and then we'll do the electrical. So we'll just put this in right like that. Make sure I'm in there. Okay. Lift this up. Push that on there real snug until it reaches that hose stop. There it is. And then that was this fastener here. It's got the electrical, and then there's a ground strap. This is a E10. I don't have a torque value for this, but it is an engine ground, so it needs to be tight, but not crazy tight. Before I tighten that up all the way, I think I'm going to go ahead and plug this in. This only goes in one way, lines up on those little parts, and then pushes down. Here we go. Okay, so I'll kind of hold that as I'm turning. I'll kind of hold this like that. That's probably good. All right. We'll put the belt back on now. Here is the belt routing. So I'm just going to start down at the crankshaft pulley. And move around this button like that. Okay, and then I'm going to go under the tensioner. And then we'll go up over the top of the water pump pulley here. And then you'll have to see the alternator pulley down here. Okay, I'm going to slip it on at the idler, so I'll leave that off for the moment. Then we come back over here, up here to the power steering pump. Around power steering pump. Okay, and then we're going down around the AC compressor. There we go. All right. I like to slip it on here at that idler. I got my 17mm socket. I'm just going to reach down there to that feature. Okay, now I'm on it in a good spot, and I can move that tensioner, and I got enough to get over this here. Just double check everything as I'm moving the tensioner back. Make sure that I'm still on all the pulleys and in the pulley grooves, and I'll slowly release it. We'll check it one more time here, starting at the 12 o'clock position on the crankshaft pulley. Going around, back side of the belt runs around the tensioner. Back side of the belt continues to run over the top of the water pump pulley. The inside of the belt runs around the alternator pulley. The inside of the belt runs around the idler, over and across all the way over here. The inside of the belt runs around the power steering. pump, and the inside of the belt runs around the AC compressor down there and back to the crankshaft. And again, just make sure that you're on the grooves for all of those parts where you're running the inside of the belt around a pulley. Everything looks good. I'm going to go ahead and do the refill. Oil is Mobil 1 European formula. Looks like that. 0W40, and it's the capacity is 8 liters or 8.5 quarts. So this whole jug is going in. And that's the end of this first jug. And we'll measure out from the second jug. Now I'm measuring, and I'm using the liter system, so I like that better. This is going to be this liter number 6 here. And this will be 7 liters. Let's see what kind of reading we got on the dipstick with 7 liters in. You can see there we're right about at the max. So what I'm going to do, it needs about 8 liters, so it's about a liter shy. But I'll go ahead and start it up and just let it run for like 5-10 seconds, and then turn it off. That'll get the oil filter filled up, and then we'll double check this level and get it back to where it needs to be. And I'll go ahead and start her up and let it run for just a few seconds. Now we'll take a look at the dipstick here. Alright, you can see after that startup, it's come down quite a bit. And here's the ½ liter. So this will get us at 7.5. The reason I'm being careful with how much I add is because you don't want to overfill these engines. You'll get a notification for high oil when you go to check the oil, and it's apparently not good for these guys to have even a little extra oil. So it's better for it to be a shade low than overfilled. Alright, there you are. A little under half on the dipstick. So I'll go ahead and start her up again and let her run for a couple minutes. And then check it one more time. And then, of course, check it after a drive. Start her up again. And I'll just let her run for maybe a minute or two. I'll just take a quick look here. It's been a few minutes now. We'll check this again and see if it's moved much. Doesn't look like it has. Hey, it's about where it was before, so we know that the oil filter's all filled up. It's halfway or so on the dipstick, so we're within range. I'm going to go ahead and take it for a drive, let it get up to operating temperature, and then I'll check the oil on the dash using the dash oil check thing. And then after the proper procedure, after shutting it off and letting it set for 5 minutes, check it again here. I might have to add about another ½ quart or ½ liter or so. Now, after you've been on a drive or a few drives, you've been checking your oil level, and you want to also check it through the dash, just get the car up to operating temperature. So that's going to be over the 80 degrees Celsius over here. And then shut it off, leave it off for a few minutes, come back and put the key in the ignition. You're going to turn it to the on position so the dash lights illuminate, but you don't want to turn the engine on. So you're going to go like this. And then you can see the temperature there. Then when this shows all dashes, you'll hit this button twice and it'll show you the oil level. So there it goes, 1, 2, and there's the oil level. And that says oil, it's almost like an IO. That means that the oil level is good. What it will say there, if the oil level is high, is oil high, then you need to drain a little bit of oil. If the oil is low, I think it has to be at least a liter low before it will show. I'm not positive about that, but it'll say minus 1.0 L. And just remember that it is giving you the value in liters. So that's another good thing to do to check your oil level. But I like dipsticks, so I do like to check it here as well. I did add a little bit more since what you last saw with 7.5 liters. So I'm somewhere between about 7.5 liters and 8 liters. I'm probably at about 7.75 liters if I had to put a value to it. Let's check this out. And that looks good. What you're looking for on this dipstick is you want to be between the min and the max. You can always just keep it right at about the halfway point, or this range right here, like where my thumb is. Most of these MLs burn oil, so after your oil change at some point you'll probably have to add some oil, and if you're at that midpoint you'll just have to add oil a little bit sooner. If you're up here, like right there, you'll be able to go a little bit further before adding oil. You get the drill. Just be in this range. So that's a wrap on this. Everything looks good. This ML has been on quite a few trips, maybe 30-40 miles, and no leaks. I will note that don't be surprised if after your first trip, no matter how much you cleaned it up back there, unless you actually took that tensioner pulley off and cleaned up behind there, don't be alarmed if you actually still see a little bit of oil collecting down on that AC mounting bolt. It's going to be the old oil that's left behind that tensioner, especially if you had a bad leak. The timing case cover will heat up and when the engine gets warm, and it'll allow that oil to drip down there. Clean up the bolt, check it again after another run, and you'll probably notice that it's clean. There won't be any leaks. So do that before you condemn your new repair. It's probably just a bunch of that old oil. And there's quite a bit that can end up. It can be a pretty messy leak. I hope this video was helpful for you. Thank you for watching, and good luck with your repair.